Hi, I'm Aria. I lived in my grandmother's shadow for 12 years. Smiled at family dinners while they mocked my old junker and handed my cousin the keys to a brand new Audi. Then the market crashed and my sister lost everything. The night I picked her up in my embarrassing car, she looked me dead in the eye and said, "I'd rather walk." That was the moment I realized I was only valuable when I was useful. So I stopped hiding. And by morning, my phone was vibrating with 23 missed calls. But it was already too late. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I still remember that Christmas Eve dinner at my aunt's house. I must have been 16, sitting at the kids' table even though my cousins my age were with the adults. My sister Vanessa glided around the room, champagne flute in hand, diamond tennis bracelet catching the light with every gesture. Aria's going through a vintage phase, she announced to everyone, her voice carrying that special tone reserved for something both amusing and slightly pathetic. She saved up for this ancient car instead of something practical. The room rippled. With polite laughter. My aunt patted my hand. "Well, we can't all have your sister's taste, dear." What Vanessa didn't mention was that my ancient car was a 1967 Ferrari 330 GTC in barn-find condition. It wasn't shiny or restored. The paint was faded, the interior worn, but it was my inheritance from Grandma Helen, the only person who ever really saw me. "This car has a soul," she'd whispered the day before she died, pressing the key into my palm. "Just like you, Aria. Don't let them convince you otherwise." My family never understood why Grandma Helen left me her old junker, while my sister got her jewelry collection. They assumed it was a slight, a quirky decision from a woman who'd grown increasingly eccentric. What they didn't know was that Grandma had recognized something in me that no one else bothered to see. That underneath my quiet exterior was someone who appreciated history, craftsmanship, and patience. I kept the Ferrari in its original condition, not because I couldn't afford to restore it, but because I loved its authenticity. Each scratch told a story. The worn leather seats had molded to Grandma's form over decades. It wasn't perfect, but it was real. And in a family that valued appearance above all else, that made both the car and me invisible. Funny how moments like that Christmas dinner never really leave you. How they settle into your bones, reshaping how you carry yourself in the world. For years, I learned to park blocks away from family gatherings. I'd arrive early or late to avoid the performative concern, "Oh, did that old thing break down again?" It was easier to be invisible than to explain myself to people who had already decided who I was. My sister's husband Daniel was the worst. He worked for a luxury car dealer and made it his personal mission to remind me how irresponsible it was to keep that death trap on the road. "I could get you a great lease on something appropriate," he'd offer loudly at gatherings, as if doing me a charitable service. I always declined politely. He never understood why. The market crashed on a Tuesday. I remember because I was at my small desk in the restoration firm where I'd worked my way up from receptionist to junior appraiser of classic automobiles. My colleagues and I watched the numbers tumbling on the screens, the growing panic in the financial analysts' voices. Within 2 weeks, the ripples hit our industry. Luxury purchases paused. Restoration projects were put on hold. We tightened our belts, but kept afloat. Vanessa called me on a Friday night, 3 months after the crash. I was cleaning spark plugs at my kitchen table, the Ferrari manual spread open beside a cup of cooling tea. I almost didn't answer. Our conversations had grown increasingly strained over the years, always revolving around what I lacked or should change. But something in me still responded to the familiar ring of her number. "It's all gone," she said without greeting. Her voice was hollow, empty of its usual polished edge. "Daniel's dealership folded. The investments tanked. They're taking the house next week." I sat silently, spark plug forgotten in my hand. "I'm so sorry," I finally managed. And I was. Despite everything, she was my sister. "We need a place to stay," she continued. "Just until we sort things out. A month, maybe 2. I glanced around my one-bedroom apartment above the garage I rented from an elderly couple in Millfield. The space was small but meticulously organized. My books on automotive history lined the walls. My grandmother's photographs watched from simple frames. It was mine, hard-earned and peaceful. "Vanessa, I don't have the space," I said gently. "My apartment is barely big enough for me." The line went quiet for a moment. Then her voice returned, sharper now. "You're seriously not going to help your own sister? After everything I've done for you?" I blinked, spark plug still in hand. "What exactly have you done for me, Vanessa?" She laughed, a brittle sound. "I've included you in everything, Aria. Family holidays, social events. I've tried to help you look presentable. God knows I've spent years trying to get you to grow up and stop living like some eccentric hermit with that ridiculous car. I set the spark plug down carefully. That's not help, Vanessa. That's control. Whatever, she snapped. Just pick us up tomorrow at 7. We're at the Westbridge Hotel. And for God's sake, bring a real car. We have luggage. Before I could answer, she hung up. I sat at my table for a long time afterward, staring at the disassembled parts, feeling something shift inside me. Not anger, exactly. More like clarity. The next evening, I pulled up to the Westbridge Hotel right at 7. Not in a borrowed, real car as Vanessa had demanded, but in my Ferrari. I'd spent the morning giving it a thorough cleaning. The faded Rosso Corsa paint was still dull in places, but I'd polished what I could. The engine purred perfectly, a testament to the hours I'd spent keeping it mechanically immaculate even while preserving its aged appearance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel, it means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Vanessa and Daniel stood under the hotel portico, 3 expensive suitcases clustered around their feet. I watched as the valet approached them, then glanced over at my car. Even from a distance, I could see the moment of recognition in his posture, the slight straightening of his spine as he realized what had just pulled up. I stepped out and walked around to open the passenger door. The valet was already moving toward me, a genuine smile on his face. "Welcome back, ma'am," he said with a respectful nod. "Beautiful 330 GTC 67, isn't it? We don't see many of these." I nodded, surprised. "You know your classics. My grandfather restored Ferraris in Medina," he explained, his eyes traveling appreciatively over the car's lines. "This is special. All original?" "As much as possible," I confirmed. "It was my grandmother's." Vanessa approached then, her face a mask of irritation. "Really, Aria? I asked you to bring a real car." The valet blinked in confusion. "Ma'am, if you'll pardon me saying so, this is one of the most valuable classic Ferraris. There are collectors who would." He trailed off at Vanessa's glare. "We have 3 suitcases," she said pointedly, looking at the Ferrari's modest trunk. I stood there, keys in hand. Something in me had finally had enough of the dismissal, of being the family's perpetual afterthought, of contorting myself to fit expectations that were never about my well-being. "I told you I was coming in my car," I said quietly. "You're welcome to call a taxi." Daniel stepped forward. "We don't have money for a taxi. That's the whole point." I met his eyes. "You had money for the Westbridge Hotel." His face flushed. Vanessa's eyes narrowed to dangerous slits. "So that's it? You're just going to leave us here?" The valet had retreated to a discreet distance, but I could feel his discomfort. I took a deep breath. "I'm willing to take one of you in one suitcase. I can come back for the rest." Vanessa laughed, a cold, cutting sound. "I'd rather walk than be seen in that embarrassment." The words hung in the air between us. I didn't flinch, didn't react. I just nodded once, pocketed my keys, and walked back to the driver's side. As I slid into the leather seat that still carried the faint scent of Grandma Helen's perfume, I finally understood something fundamental. I had spent my life trying to earn the approval of people who had decided long ago that I wasn't worth seeing. I started the engine, its deep rumble vibrating through me like a second heartbeat. In the rearview mirror, I could see Vanessa and Daniel standing rigid by their luggage, their faces a mixture of disbelief and fury. The valet gave me a small, understanding nod as I pulled away. That was the moment I realized I was only valuable to them when I was useful. When I could be shaped into what they needed. The moment I stood firm in who I actually was, the moment I stopped apologizing for existing on my own terms, I became invisible again. Or worse, an embarrassment. I drove back to my apartment slowly, windows down, letting the evening air wash over me. For the first time in years, I felt a weight lifting. Not happiness, exactly, but something close to it. Freedom, perhaps. The freedom that comes with finally seeing a truth you've been carrying all along. By the time I pulled into my garage space, my decision was made. I wouldn't be the family ATM anymore. I wouldn't be the convenient scapegoat, the cautionary tale, the punchline. I would just be Aria, granddaughter of Helen, owner of a 1967 Ferrari 330 GTC that was worth more than most people's houses, not that my family had ever bothered to find that out. I climbed the stairs to my apartment, made a cup of tea, and turned off my phone. The silence felt clean somehow, purifying. I sat by my window, watching stars appear one by one in the darkening sky, and I thought about Grandma Helen. About how she'd recognized something in me worth nurturing. About how she'd taught me that true value often lies beneath the surface, invisible to those unwilling to look deeper. The next morning, I woke to sunlight streaming through my curtains. For a moment, I lay still, listening to the birds outside my window, feeling strangely light. Then I remembered. Vanessa. Daniel. The hotel. I reached for my phone and turned it on. The notifications came in waves. 23 missed calls. 12 voicemails. 34 text messages. Not just from Vanessa and Daniel, but from my parents, aunts, uncles, cousins. The family machine had activated, closing ranks. How could you abandon your sister like that? After everything she's done for you. We raised you better than this. Selfish, just like your grandmother. That last one made me smile, just a little. If being like Grandma Helen meant having the courage to live authentically, then perhaps it was the first true compliment my family had ever given me. I scrolled through the messages without opening them fully. The pattern was clear: shock, guilt, manipulation. The same tools that had kept me tethered for years, answering every call, showing up to every event, accepting every criticism as if it were helpful guidance rather than control. But something had shifted. The valet's respectful recognition. The way he'd immediately seen the value in what my family had dismissed for years. It was a small moment, but it had cracked open a door I couldn't close again. I put down the phone and made coffee. As the rich aroma filled my small kitchen, I found myself thinking about worth, how we measure it, how we prove it to others, how we come to believe in it for ourselves. My family had spent years convincing me that I was lacking, that my choices were embarrassing, that I needed their guidance to become acceptable. And all along, I'd been driving a masterpiece. Living simply not because I had to, but because I valued different things. Building expertise in a field I loved. Honoring my grandmother's legacy in the way that felt right to me. As I sipped my coffee, I made another decision. I wouldn't explain. I wouldn't justify. I wouldn't try to prove my worth with facts about market values or collector interest. That would still be playing their game, seeking validation on their terms. Instead, I would simply live. On my terms. According to my values. Without apology. I picked up my phone one more time, not to answer the barrage of messages, but to make a call of my own. To Alberto Martinelli, the master restorer I'd met at a classic car show last year. The man who'd looked at photos of my Ferrari and quietly told me what it could be worth with the right restoration. Aria, he answered warmly. I was just thinking about you. How is the 330? She's ready, I said, surprising myself with the certainty in my voice. I'd like to start the restoration. We discussed. There was a moment of pleased silence on the other end. You won't regret it, he said finally. Your grandmother's car deserves to shine again. And so do you. I felt something catch in my throat at his words. Thank you, Alberto. After we'd made arrangements for him to see the car the following week, I turned my phone to silent again and began my day. I cleaned my apartment, went for a long walk, and bought fresh flowers for my small dining table. Simple actions, but they felt like declarations. I am here. I matter. Not because of what I can give to others, but because I exist. That evening, as I was preparing a simple dinner, a knock came at my door. Not a tentative tap, but a sharp, insistent pounding. I knew before I looked through the peephole who it would be. Vanessa stood in the hallway, arms crossed, expression thunderous. She'd found my address somehow, probably from our cousin May who'd visited once last year. I considered not answering, but then decided against it. This confrontation had been years in the making. I opened the door but didn't step back to invite her in. Vanessa. She looked me up and down, taking in my simple jeans and t-shirt, the apartment visible behind me. Her lip curled slightly. Nice place, she said, sarcasm dripping from each word. Very minimal. I didn't respond to the bait. What do you want? She blinked, perhaps surprised by my directness. Usually, I would have been apologizing by now, offering tea, trying to smooth things over. You left us stranded. She said accusingly. I offered you a ride. You declined. In that ridiculous car. With Daniel's colleagues possibly seeing us. She threw up her hands. Do you have any idea how humiliating that would have been? I leaned against the doorframe. More humiliating than being homeless? Her face flushed. We're not homeless. We're staying with Mom and Dad until we sort things out. Of course they were. Our parents had always had a safety net for Vanessa. Then why are you here? She shifted uncomfortably. Look, we need help. Just until Daniel finds something new. Alone, that's all. I studied my sister, really looked at her perhaps for the first time in years. The expensive highlights in her hair, the designer handbag she still carried despite claiming financial ruin, the entitlement that radiated from her every gesture. She wasn't asking for help. She was demanding what she felt was her due. No, I said simply. The single word seemed to hang in the air between us. Vanessa's eyes widened in genuine shock. What? No, I repeated. I'm not giving you money. She stared at me like I'd suddenly started speaking a foreign language. But, we're family. Yes, I agreed. We are. And for years, that's meant I accept whatever scraps of attention you're willing to give, while you take whatever you need. It's meant I apologize for my existence while you expect applause for yours. That's not family, Vanessa. That's exploitation. Her mouth opened and closed several times. Finally, she managed, it's because of that stupid car, isn't it? You think you're special now because some valet recognized your junk heap? I smiled. Then, a real smile that felt strange on my face after so long. No, Vanessa. It's because I finally recognized myself. She flinched as if I'd slapped her. Mom and Dad were right. You're turning into a bitter, selfish old woman. Just like Grandma. Helen. At that, I laughed. A genuine laugh that bubbled up from somewhere deep inside me. Thank you, I said sincerely. That's the nicest thing you've ever said to me. Confusion flickered across her face, quickly replaced by anger. You'll regret this, she warned. When Daniel gets back on his feet, I wish you both well, I interrupted. Truly. But my answer is still no. I began to close the door, but her hand shot out, stopping it. Wait, she said, her voice suddenly softer, calculating. What about a trade? You can stay in our guest house while we figure things out. It's sitting empty anyway. And I'll put in a good word for you with the Hendersons. Margaret's son is single, you know. Not exactly a catch, but beggars. Can't be choosers at your age. The condescension in her offer was so breathtaking that for a moment I could only stare. Then I gently removed her hand from my door. Goodbye, Vanessa. This time when I closed the door, I locked it firmly behind me. I stood there for a moment, listening to her incredulous huffing on the other side, followed by the sharp click of her heels as she finally walked away. Instead of feeling guilty or anxious as I would have in the past, I felt strangely peaceful. As if I'd finally put down a heavy suitcase I'd been carrying for years. I returned to my dinner preparations. Cutting vegetables with careful precision, aware of each movement, each breath. Present in my life in a way I hadn't been before. Later that night, I sat by my window again, nursing a glass of wine. My phone had continued to buzz throughout the evening, the family network activating in full force. I imagined the conversations. The strategic planning on how to bring me back in line. The thought didn't frighten me anymore. I picked up an old photograph of Grandma Helen standing beside her Ferrari when it was new. She looked directly at the camera, a slight smile playing at the corners of her mouth, uninterested in performing joy for the photographer. Just authentically herself. I understand now, I whispered to her image. Why you left me the car. Why you told me it had a soul. In that moment, I felt a profound connection to her, not just as a granddaughter to a grandmother, but as one authentic soul recognizing another across time. She had seen in me what my family couldn't, not a project to be fixed or a resource to be used, but a person of value, exactly as I was. I slept deeply that night, without dreams. When I woke, it was with a clarity I hadn't felt in years. I knew exactly what I needed to do next. The restoration shop was nestled in an industrial district just outside the city limits. Low-slung buildings with roll-up doors, the occasional sound of pneumatic tools, the smell of motor oil and possibility. I pulled the Ferrari into a space marked Martinelli Classics and took a deep breath before stepping out. This wasn't just about a car anymore. This was about reclaiming something essential. Alberto emerged from the workshop, wiping his hands on a red cloth. His face lit up when he saw the Ferrari, not with the polite interest of someone making a sale, but with genuine appreciation. He circled the car slowly, eyes taking in every detail. She has good bones, he said finally, his Italian accent more pronounced when he was moved. Your grandmother kept her mechanically perfect. I nodded, throat suddenly tight. She believed in maintaining what matters, even if the outside doesn't look perfect. Alberto glanced up at me, something knowing in his gaze. A wise philosophy. For both cars and life, yes? We spent the next hour discussing the restoration process. Alberto wasn't interested in creating a pristine showpiece that would never be driven. He understood that cars like this were meant to live, to run, to be experienced. We agreed on a sympathetic restoration, addressing the body damage, refreshing the paint to its original glory, but preserving the patina of the leather interior, where my grandmother's hands had gripped the steering wheel for decades. It will take time, he warned. Perhaps 6 months. And it will not be inexpensive. I smiled. I've been saving for this my entire adult life, Alberto. I just didn't know it until now. As I handed him the keys, I felt a momentary pang, not of regret, but of transition. For years, the Ferrari had been my secret connection to Grandma Helen, the physical manifestation of being seen and valued. Now I was bringing that connection into the light, letting it evolve into something new. Alberto seemed to sense my hesitation. Your grandmother's spirit will still be in this car, he assured me. We're just letting her true beauty shine through again. I drove home in the loaner car Alberto had provided, a modest Fiat that couldn't have been more different from the Ferrari. Yet there was freedom in its anonymity, in moving through the world without the weight of family judgment or the protective secrecy I'd maintained around my inheritance. When I arrived at my apartment, May was waiting by the door. My cousin had always existed in the middle space of our family, not as privileged as Vanessa, not as overlooked as me. We'd been close as children before the subtle hierarchies of adolescence had pushed us into our assigned roles. "Hey," she said, straightening up as I approached. She looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from foot to foot. "Can we talk?" I unlocked my door without answering and motioned her inside. Unlike with Vanessa, I wasn't worried about May judging my living space. She'd always been more interested in people than appearances. "Your sister's on the warpath," she said without preamble, settling onto my small sofa. "She's telling everyone you've had some kind of breakdown. That you're destroying family relationships out of spite." I put on the kettle for tea, movements deliberate and calm. "And what do you think?" May sighed, running a hand through her curls. "I think Vanessa's always been full of it. But something's definitely changed with you. You're different." The kettle whistled. I poured hot water over tea bags and mismatched mugs, one from a museum, one from a roadside diner in Vermont where Grandma Helen and I had stopped during our last road trip together. I handed the museum mug to May and sat across from her. "I'm not different," I corrected gently. "I'm just done pretending." She stirred her tea thoughtfully. "Pretending what?" "That I'm okay with being the family's perpetual disappointment. That I deserve the condescension. That my life choices are somehow inferior because they don't match what everyone else values." May was quiet for a long moment. "The Ferrari," she said finally. "It's worth something, isn't it?" "A lot of something." I nodded. "Depending on condition after restoration, between $1 and $2 million. She choked on her tea. "Million? With an M?" "It's a rare model. Numbers matching. Original paint code. Documented provenance." I shrugged. Grandma Helen knew exactly what she was giving me. And what she was saying to the rest of the family. May set her mug down with a thunk. "I'm Aria. Does Vanessa know?" If she'd bothered to look beyond her assumptions, she could have found out any time. It's not like I hid it. I just didn't broadcast it to people who never really looked at me in the first place. Understanding dawned on May's face. "That's why you wouldn't give her money. Not because you couldn't, but because it wouldn't stop with one loan," I finished. "Because I'm tired of being valued only for what I can provide. Because some relationships only work when they're unbalanced." May leaned back, studying me with new eyes. "Damn, cuz you grew a backbone." I smiled despite myself. More like I finally recognized the one I always had. We talked for another hour, really talked, in a way we hadn't since we were kids building sandcastles at the family lake house. May told me about her struggling catering business, about the passion she'd put on hold to pursue a sensible career that would earn family approval. I told her about my work as an appraiser, about the quiet satisfaction of recognizing value that others missed. When she left, she hugged me tightly. "For what it's worth," she whispered, "Grandma Helen was right about you." That night, I sat at my small dining table and made a list. Not of grievances or hurts, though there were plenty, but of what I wanted my life to look like moving forward. The dreams I'd set aside in the pursuit of family approval. The boundaries I needed to establish. The people who saw me clearly and the ones who never would, no matter what I achieved. At the top of the list, I wrote, "Stop apologizing for taking up space." The next morning, I woke to a text from an unknown number. "Your car is special. So are you. Don't let them tell you different." Marcus, the valet from Westbridge. I stared at the message, wondering how he'd gotten my number, before remembering. I'd given the hotel my contact information when I'd called to explain why I couldn't accommodate my sister. The gesture was unexpected, a small kindness from a stranger who had seen value where my own family couldn't. I texted back a simple, "Thank you," and got ready for work. The classic car appraisal firm where I worked was hosting a major collector that day, and I had been assigned to the assessment team, a recognition of my growing expertise that would have once felt like validation. Now it simply felt like the natural progression of dedicating myself to something I loved. The collector was a tech entrepreneur in his 50s, leather jacket and expensive jeans signaling the casual confidence of extreme wealth. He had acquired 3 vintage Ferraris and wanted independent documentation of their provenance and value. As I examined the first, a 1965 275 GTB, I felt his eyes on me. "You know these cars," he observed. Not a question, but a statement. I glanced up from where I was checking the chassis number. "Yes. Most people just see the badge, the color. They miss the soul." He gestured toward the car. This one has stories to tell. I nodded, returning to my inspection. The best ones always do. We worked in companionable silence for a while, me documenting, him occasionally pointing out a detail or sharing an anecdote about the car's history. It was refreshing to interact with someone who valued knowledge over appearances, substance over status. As I was completing my notes, he said casually, I heard Martinelli has a 330 GTC in his shop. Original condition, one owner. Rare find. My hand stilled momentarily on the clipboard. News travels fast in collector circles. He smiled. It's a small world. Smaller when you're talking about cars like these. He paused. Alberto said it belongs to a young woman who's had it since her grandmother passed. That she's kept it. Original all these years when most would have sold to the highest bidder. I met his gaze directly. Some things are worth more than money. Something in his expression shifted, approval perhaps, or recognition. If you ever decide to sell after the restoration, I'd be interested. Not to flip it or hide it away in a collection. To drive it. To honor it. I nodded, not committing, but acknowledging the respect in his offer. I'll keep that in mind. When I returned to my desk later that day, I found an envelope waiting for me. Inside was a job offer, senior appraiser at Blackwell Heritage Automobiles, one of the most prestigious firms in the country. The salary was double what I currently made. The letter mentioned my exceptional eye for authenticity and deep understanding of automotive history. I sat back in my chair, letter in hand, emotions swirling. This wasn't just a job offer. It was external validation of everything I'd been quietly building while my family dismissed my choices. It was proof that expertise earned through passion had tangible value in the world beyond my family's narrow definition of success. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, family dinner Sunday. Your sister needs our support right now. Wear something nice for once. The contrast was so stark. It was almost comical. In one hand, professional recognition of my skills and knowledge. In the other, the same old family dynamic, commands disguised as invitations, criticism cloaked as concern, my sister's needs elevated above all else. I didn't respond to the text. Instead, I called Blackwell and accepted the job offer. That evening, as I packed up my apartment, the new position would require relocating to Chicago. My phone rang continuously. Vanessa first, then my mother, then my aunt. I let each call go to voicemail, focusing instead on wrapping Grandma Helen's photographs in tissue paper, boxing up the automotive books I'd collected over the years, sorting through the quiet life I'd built while trying to remain small enough to be acceptable to my family. Finally, I picked up on my father's call. Unlike the others, he rarely reached out directly. Aria, he said, his voice gruff with what might have been concern. Your mother's worried. You're not answering calls. I folded a sweater neatly. Phone cradled between ear and shoulder. I've been busy, Dad. I'm moving. Moving? Where? Why haven't you mentioned this? The questions were reasonable on the surface, but underneath was the familiar tone, the one that suggested I was being irresponsible, making decisions without proper consultation with the family council. I've accepted a new position in Chicago. Senior appraiser at Blackwell Heritage Automobiles. Silence stretched between us. Then, cautiously, that sounds impressive. It is. I didn't elaborate, didn't justify, didn't seek his approval. He cleared his throat. Your sister's having a difficult time. She and Daniel are staying with us until things stabilize. We're having a family dinner Sunday to discuss how everyone can help. There it was, the real reason for the call. Not interest in my career advancement, but recruitment for Vanessa's support system. I won't be able to attend, I said calmly. I'll be preparing for the move. Aria. His voice took on the stern quality I remembered from childhood. Family comes first. Your sister needs us. I sat on the edge of my bed, surrounded by half-packed boxes of my life. Dad, I have to ask, if the situation were reversed, if I were the one staying with you after financial trouble, would Vanessa be expected to rearrange her life to support me? The silence that followed was answer enough. That's what I thought. I said quietly. I wish Vanessa and Daniel well. I truly do. But I'm not coming to dinner, and I'm not writing checks. He sighed heavily. You've changed. No, Dad. I've just stopped accepting that I deserve less consideration than everyone else in this family. After we hung up, I continued packing. Each item I wrapped and boxed feeling like another step toward a life defined by my own values rather than my family's expectations. The Ferrari would be shipped to Chicago once Alberto completed the restoration. The thought of driving it through my new city, no longer hiding its value or my own, filled me with quiet joy. My phone buzzed again, a text from May this time. Just heard about Blackwell. That's major, cuz. Congrats. For once, someone in my family was celebrating my success instead of minimizing it. It was a small thing, but it felt enormous. The next day, as I was loading boxes into my car for donation, a sleek black Mercedes pulled up to the curb. Daniel stepped out, looking less polished than usual but still carrying himself with the entitled confidence that had always characterized him. Aria, he called, striding toward me. We need to talk. I closed the trunk, keys in hand. I don't think we have anything to discuss, Daniel. He blocked my path to the driver's door. Don't be difficult. This affects the whole family. Your financial situation is not my responsibility. His expression hardened. That car of yours? Vanessa says it might be worth something to collectors. So there it was, the real reason for his visit. Not to reconcile, not to apologize for years of condescension, but to assess whether I had assets that could solve his problems. My grandmother's Ferrari is not for sale. Don't be selfish, he snapped. We're talking about helping family. Your sister is practically having anxiety attacks over our situation. I studied him, the man who had spent years mockingly offering to replace my embarrassing junker with a respectable lease, who had rolled his eyes at my career choice, who had treated me as Vanessa's less successful appendage rather than a person in my own right. Daniel, I said calmly, I'm not selling my car to bail you out of financial decisions you made. And I'm done being manipulated by accusations of selfishness whenever I don't sacrifice my own well-being for this family. His face reddened. You've always been jealous of Vanessa. Always resented her success, her style, the fact that she actually made something of herself while you played with old cars. The accusation might once have wounded me, made me doubt myself. Now it just revealed how little he had ever understood me, how little any of them had bothered to see beyond their own assumptions. I was never jealous of Vanessa, I said. I just wanted to be valued for who I actually am, not punished for who I'm not. He scoffed. Very philosophical. Meanwhile, your sister is suffering while you hoard assets. Daniel, I said, the choices that led to your current situation were yours and Vanessa's. The luxury home beyond your means. The leased cars you couldn't actually afford. The lifestyle maintained for appearances rather than financial reality. I'm not responsible for cushioning the consequences of those choices. He stepped closer, voice dropping to a threatening tone. Your grandmother should have left that car to someone who would appreciate its value. You've just let it rot. I didn't back away. That's the difference between us, Daniel. You see the Ferrari as something to liquidate for quick cash. I see it as a piece of history to be preserved and honored. It's just a car, he spat. And that, I said quietly, is why Grandma Helen left it to me. I stepped around him and got into my car. As I drove away, I watched him in the rearview mirror, standing on the curb, the perfect image of a man who believed the world owed him the lifestyle he'd chosen regardless of whether he'd earned it. That night, I sat in my mostly packed apartment and opened my laptop. I navigated to a folder of scanned documents I'd kept for years, the authentication papers for the Ferrari, the original sales receipt from 1967, photographs of Grandma Helen with the car when it was new. And one document I'd never shared with anyone, a letter she'd left with her will. My dearest Aria, it began. By now you've inherited the Ferrari, and I imagine the family is buzzing with opinions about my decision. They will say I was being eccentric or spiteful. The truth is simpler, I'm leaving the car to the only person who will truly understand what it represents. I read the letter again, though I knew it by heart. Grandma Helen wrote about purchasing the Ferrari as a young widow, against the advice of everyone in her life. About the freedom she found behind the wheel, the joy of mastering the powerful machine, the quiet rebellion of a woman driving a car that most believed should belong to a man. People will always try to convince you that what brings you joy is somehow wrong, she wrote. That your version of success isn't valid. That your way of moving through the world needs correction. Don't believe them, my darling girl. Trust the voice inside you that recognizes beauty and value where others see only strangeness or waste. I traced my finger over her signature, feeling a connection that transcended time and space. Grandma Helen had faced the same pressures. The same dismissals, the same attempts to reshape her into something more acceptable. But she had persisted in being authentically herself. In her letter's final paragraph, she had written, "The Ferrari is worth a great deal in monetary terms. But its true value lies in what it represents, the courage to live on your own terms, even when those around you disapprove. That is my real legacy to you, Aria. The car is just the vessel." As I folded the letter carefully back into its envelope, my phone lit up with a new message. It was from Alberto, with an attachment. I opened it to find a photo of my Ferrari. Partly through its restoration process. The dull, faded paint was gone from the front section, replaced by the vibrant Rosso Corsa that had once made it gleam in the sunlight. The transformation was striking, not because the car had become something new, but because its true nature was being revealed again after years of being hidden. Your grandmother's car is beginning to shine again, Alberto had written. Just as she would have wanted. I stared at the image for a long time, feeling something expand in my chest. Joy, perhaps. Or validation. Or simply the quiet satisfaction of honoring what matters, regardless of whether others understand. Chicago greeted me with a biting wind. And steel-gray skies, so different from the mild weather I'd left behind. I stood at the window of my temporary corporate apartment, watching the city pulse below me. Lights flickered on across the skyline as dusk settled, each one representing a life, a story, possibilities I couldn't yet imagine. I'd been in the city for 3 weeks, and already I could feel myself expanding to fill the space this new life offered. My phone buzzed with a text from Alberto, progress update tomorrow. The body work is complete. You will not believe the transformation. I smiled, anticipation warming me despite the chill seeping through the glass. The Ferrari wouldn't arrive for another 2 months, but each update from Alberto felt like a step closer to reuniting with an old friend. My new position at Blackwell had exceeded even my highest expectations. On my first day, the director had taken me on a private tour of their restoration facilities, a climate-controlled wonderland of vintage automobiles in various stages of rebirth. We've been watching your career for some time, he confided as we walked past a 1938 Bugatti receiving meticulous attention from a white-glove technician. Your reputation for accuracy and historical context is unmatched for someone your age. I'd blinked in surprise. My reputation? He smiled. The vintage car world is small, Aria. Word travels. Especially when someone consistently identifies overlooked gems that others have dismissed. Just like that, the years I'd spent building knowledge while my family rolled their eyes at my obsession were recognized as valuable expertise. The irony wasn't lost on me. Now, 3 weeks in, I'd already led 2 major appraisals and been invited to join the selection committee for an upcoming museum exhibition on post-war Italian sports cars. My colleagues treated me with respect bordering on deference when it came to Ferrari identification. No one questioned my knowledge or suggested I should pursue something more suitable. A knock at my door pulled me from my thoughts. I wasn't expecting anyone, I barely knew anyone in Chicago yet. I peered through the peephole, then stepped back in shock. My mother stood in the hallway, elegant as always in a camel hair coat, her silver-streaked hair swept into its customary chignon. I hesitated, then opened the door. "Mom," I said, trying to keep surprise from my voice. "What are you doing here?" She glanced past me into the apartment. "Aren't you going to invite me in?" I stepped aside, watching as she surveyed the space. The minimalist corporate furnishings, the few personal items I'd unpacked, the stack of automotive journals on the coffee table. Her expression revealed nothing. "How did you find me?" I asked, closing the door. "May told me about your new job. The company website lists you as staff. I called and said I was your mother, needed to send something important." She removed her gloves deliberately. They were quite helpful. Of course they were. My mother had always had that effect on people, a blend of authority and charm that made them want to accommodate her requests without questioning. "You could have called," I pointed out. "It's a long way to come without notice." She sat on the edge of the sofa without being invited. "Would you have answered?" The question hung between us, honest in a way my mother rarely was. I didn't reply, which was answer enough. "Your sister is struggling," she said finally. "Daniel found a position, but it's a significant step down. They've had to sell most of their things." I remained standing. "I'm sorry to hear that. But I'm not clear on why you've come all this way to tell me." She looked up sharply. "Because we're family, Aria. Family supports each other through difficult times." "Some members of the family," I corrected gently. "When have any of you rearranged your lives to support me?" A flash of irritation crossed her face. "That's different. You've always been self-sufficient." "Self-sufficient," I repeated. "Is that what we're calling it now? What would you call it?" I considered the question seriously. "Invisible. Except when needed for something specific." My mother's posture stiffened. "That's not fair." "No," I agreed. "It wasn't." She stood abruptly and walked to the window, presenting her back to me as she gazed out at the city lights. For a moment, she looked smaller, older than I remembered. "Your grandmother was difficult, too," she said finally. "Always insisting on doing things her own way, no matter how it affected others. That car was just one example." I moved to stand beside her, both of us looking outward rather than at each other. "What was it about Grandma Helen that bothered you so much, Mom? That she lived authentically? That she didn't conform to expectations?" My mother's reflection in the glass showed a flicker of something, pain, perhaps, or regret. She was selfish, she said, but the conviction had drained from her voice. Was she? Or did she just refuse to be diminished? We stood in silence. For a long moment, the city sprawling before us, vast and indifferent to our small human drama. Why the Ferrari? My mother asked suddenly. Of all the things she could have left you, why that impractical, ostentatious car? I turned to look at her directly. Have you ever actually looked at that car, Mom? Really looked at it? She frowned. Of course I've seen it. Seeing isn't the same as looking, I said. You saw an old car taking up space in Grandma's garage. You never looked close enough to recognize what it actually was. And what was it? A masterpiece. A piece of automotive history. A symbol of freedom and independence. And yes, worth a small fortune. Her eyes widened slightly. Worth between $1 and $2 million, depending on condition after restoration. I watched the information land, her expression shifting from disbelief to calculation to something like wonder. All this time, she breathed. We thought Helen was punishing you with that old thing. She wasn't punishing me, I said. She was recognizing me. She saw that I had the patience to appreciate something's true value, not just its surface appearance. My mother looked at me then, really looked at me perhaps for the first time in years. And now you're having it restored. I nodded. By one of the best in the business. To sell it? No. To honor it. To drive it the way Grandma Helen intended. She turned back to the window, her reflection thoughtful. You really are like her. For once, it didn't sound like an accusation. We ordered takeout, neither of us suggested going out, as if we both recognized this conversation needed the privacy of these four walls. Over containers of Thai food, my mother asked about my new job, actually listening to my answers for once. I found myself sharing details of my work, the thrill of authenticating rare vehicles, the satisfaction of preserving automotive history. I never understood, she admitted, setting down her fork. I thought it was just stubbornness. Refusing to move on from Helen's old car. It was never just about the car, I said. It was about being seen for who I am, not who you all wanted me to be. She was quiet for a moment. We thought we were helping. Guiding you toward a more conventional path. I know, I said, and I did. My family's dismissal of my choices hadn't come from malice but from a genuine inability to see value in anything that didn't match their definition of success. But sometimes the less conventional path is exactly where someone belongs. Later, as my mother prepared to leave for her hotel, she paused at the door. Vanessa doesn't know I'm here, she confessed. She'd be furious if she knew I was taking your side. I wasn't surprised. I'm not asking you to take sides, Mom. I'm just asking to be treated with the same respect you give Vanessa. She nodded slowly. I need to think about all this. About how we've positioned you in the family. She hesitated. But Aria, your sister really is struggling. Not just financially, but with her sense of self. Everything she built her identity around has crumbled. I felt a pang of empathy. Despite everything, Vanessa had always defined herself through external markers of success, the right house, the right car, the right social connections. Losing those must have been devastating for her. I can't fix that for her, I said gently. And sending money won't fix it either. She needs to find value in herself beyond possessions and appearances, just like I had to. My mother looked thoughtful. I'm not sure she knows how. Maybe that's the real gift you could give her then. Not protection from consequences, but guidance toward finding her intrinsic worth. Something shifted in my mother's expression, surprise, perhaps, or the beginnings of a new understanding. She reached out and touched my cheek briefly. When did you get so wise? I smiled. I've always been this person, Mom. You just weren't looking. After she left, I sat at the window again, watching the city lights and thinking about identity. About worth, about the stories we tell ourselves and others. About how sometimes losing everything external can be the pathway to finding what truly matters. The next morning, I woke to an email from Alberto with attached photos of the Ferrari. The transformation was breathtaking. The body had been meticulously restored, the paint now gleaming the deep, vibrant red it was always meant to be. The chrome details sparkled, and even in photographs, the car radiated presence and history. The interior remains as we discussed, Alberto wrote. Cleaned and conditioned, but preserving the patina and character of the original leather. Your grandmother's essence remains in the car, while its true beauty now shines for all to see. I studied the photos, emotion welling in my throat. This was the car Grandma Helen had driven proudly through a world that didn't expect women to command such power. This was the legacy she'd entrusted to me, not just a valuable object, but a philosophy of living authentically despite pressure to conform. I was still looking at the photos when my phone rang. Unknown number. Hello? Aria? It's Marcus. The Valet? From Westbridge? I smiled, surprised. I remember. How are you? Good, yeah. Look, this is probably weird, but I'm actually in Chicago for a conference. Automotive Services Management. Saw on your company website that you're here too. Thought maybe we could grab coffee? I've got some questions about classic cars. Thinking about a career change. The unexpected connection made me laugh. Sure. I'd like that. We arranged to meet at a coffee shop near my office the following day. After we hung up, I found myself smiling at the serendipity. A month ago, I would have declined, too conditioned by family judgment to believe anyone would genuinely value my knowledge or company. Now I was saying yes to new connections. New possibilities. My workday was filled with preparations for an upcoming auction, a collection of post-war European sports cars, including 2 Ferraris from the same era as my grandmother's. My colleagues consulted me on authentication details, valuation considerations, historical context. In this world, my expertise wasn't just tolerated, it was sought after, valued, respected. During lunch, I received a text from May, check your email. Just sent something you need to see. I opened my inbox to find a forwarded message, an invitation to a family gathering at my parents' home that weekend. The occasion, celebrating Vanessa's new beginning. Attached was a separate note from May, word as she landed some TV hosting gig for a local lifestyle show. Mom and Dad are treating it like she won an Oscar. Thought you should know the narrative is shifting. I set my phone down, emotions mixed. I was genuinely glad if Vanessa had found a new direction. And yet, the speed with which the family had rallied to reframe her situation, from financial disaster to exciting new chapter, highlighted the disparity in how our journeys were perceived and supported. I texted May back, thanks for the heads up. Glad she's found something new. May replied immediately, you're not bitter at all and I'm here for it. When's the Ferrari arriving? I want front seat privileges when you make your triumphant return. I smiled at her message. 2 months. And you've got shotgun whenever you want it. That evening, I had dinner with colleagues at an upscale restaurant overlooking the lake. The conversation flowed easily between automotive history, current market trends, and personal stories. No one questioned my knowledge or expertise. No one suggested I should be pursuing a more suitable career or lifestyle. I was simply Aria, respected appraiser, valued team member. As we were finishing dessert, the director raised his glass. To Aria, he said, whose insight on the Monza was spot on. The authentication came back positive this afternoon. Museum-worthy. Just as you suspected. The others raised their glasses, echoing the toast. I felt a flush of pride that had nothing to do with validation from others and everything to do with the satisfaction of truly seeing and understanding something of value that others had missed. Later, as I walked back to my apartment in the crisp night air, I thought about visibility, about being seen, truly seen, for who you are. My family had looked at me for years without seeing me, just as they'd looked at Grandma Helen's Ferrari without recognizing its value. They'd been so fixated on their expectations, their predetermined narrative, that they'd missed what was actually in front of them. My phone buzzed with a text from my mother, had a long talk with your father about everything. He's processing. Thinking about your grandmother's car differently now. I paused on the sidewalk, pedestrians flowing around me. Like a stream around a stone. The message wasn't an apology, not exactly. But it was an acknowledgement. A small shift in perspective. Perhaps even the beginning of something new. Thank you for letting me know, I replied. Give him my best. The next morning, I met Marcus at the coffee shop as planned. He was already there when I arrived, nervously turning a paper cup between his hands. He looked different in casual clothes, younger, less formal than in his valet uniform. Hey, he said, standing as I approached. Thanks for meeting me. I wasn't sure if you'd remember me. I smiled. The valet who recognized my grandmother's Ferrari when my own family couldn't? Kind of hard to forget. He grinned, relaxing visibly. Yeah, that was a moment, wasn't it? Your sister's face when I said what it was. We settled at a table by the window, sunlight streaming through the glass, warming the space between us. Marcus told me about his background, growing up. Helping in his grandfather's garage, learning about classic cars through hands-on experience rather than formal education. How he'd taken the valet job to pay bills but dreamed of working with vintage automobiles. I just don't know how to break in, he admitted. Without credentials, without connections. I thought about my own journey, how I'd started as a receptionist at the restoration firm, absorbing knowledge, proving my worth through observation and insight rather than formal qualifications. Passion and a good eye count for more than diplomas in this world, I told him. Start where you can, even if it's just detailing classics at a high-end shop. Learn everything, ask questions, be humble but confident in what you do know. His eyes lit up as I spoke, not just with hope but with recognition, the relief of being truly seen, of having your dreams taken seriously instead of dismissed. I could give you some names, I offered. People who value skill and dedication over formal training. You'd do that, he asked, surprise evident in his voice. Of course. Why wouldn't I? He shrugged, looking down at his coffee. People don't usually go out of their way to help someone they barely know. I thought about Grandma Helen, about how she'd recognized something in me worth nurturing when others saw only what I wasn't. How that single act of being truly seen had shaped my entire life. Sometimes all it takes is one person who sees your potential, I said. Who validates what you already know about yourself. We talked for another hour, exchanging stories about memorable cars we'd encountered, moments of discovery, the peculiar joy of recognizing value that others have overlooked. There was an easy connection between us, built on shared passion and mutual respect. As we prepared to leave, Marcus hesitated. Can I ask you something personal? I nodded. What did it feel like? Driving away that night, knowing your family didn't see the value of what you had? The question caught me off guard with its insight. I considered it seriously. It felt like confirmation, I said finally. Like all the years of feeling unseen weren't just in my head, but also like freedom. Like I finally had permission to stop trying to be visible to people who weren't really looking. He nodded slowly. I get that. My dad always wanted me to take over the family insurance business. Couldn't understand why I'd rather get my hands dirty working on old cars than wear a suit to an office. He gave a small laugh. Called it wasting potential. And now? Now I think potential is only wasted when you try to force it into a shape it was never meant to take. The wisdom in his words struck me, simple but profound. Exactly. I said softly. Exactly that. We parted with plans to meet again, a connection forged through mutual recognition. As I walked back to my office, I thought about the strange, winding path that had brought me here, from the quiet girl folding napkins into maple leaves, desperate for validation, to the woman walking confidently through Chicago, building a life on her own terms. My phone buzzed with an email notification. Alberto again, with more photos of the Ferrari, this time of the engine, meticulously restored to original specification. The heart of the beast, he'd written. As strong and vital as the day it left Maranello. I stopped on the sidewalk to study the images, marveling at the craftsmanship, the history, the lineage of hands that had touched these parts over decades. From the factory workers in Italy to Grandma Helen to me. A continuum of care and appreciation, of seeing value and preserving it. Another message came through, from Vanessa this time. My pulse quickened. We hadn't spoken since that night at my apartment door. Mom says you're having Grandma's car restored. Says it's worth a fortune. Why didn't you tell us? No greeting. No acknowledgement of our last interaction. Just straight to the point, to what suddenly mattered now that monetary value had been confirmed. I stared at the message, considering how to respond. The old me would have apologized, would have explained, would have tried to smooth things over. The new me recognized the pattern for what it was, another attempt to make me responsible for others' lack of perception. You never asked, I typed simply. You decided what it was without looking deeper. I hesitated, then added, congratulations on your new position. May mentioned it. I hope it brings you fulfillment. Her response came quickly, we should talk. About the car. About everything. I tucked my phone away without replying and continued my walk to the office. The conversation with Vanessa would happen eventually, but on my terms, in my time. I wasn't running away from reconciliation, but I wasn't rushing toward it either. Some realizations needed time to settle, some perspectives needed space to shift. As I entered the Blackwell building, my colleague Julia waved me over excitedly. The collector from Monaco called, she said. The one with the contested Testarossa? He specifically requested you for the authentication team. Said your reputation precedes you. I smiled, a warm feeling of professional recognition washing over me. Happy to help. He also mentioned something about a 330 GTC being restored. By Martinelli. Said the owner must be someone with exceptional taste and knowledge. She raised an eyebrow. Anything you want to share? I laughed. It's a family heirloom. My grandmother's. Your grandmother had serious car game, Julia said admiringly. Yes, I agreed, thinking of Helen's fierce independence, her refusal to be diminished, her ability to recognize value beyond surface appearances. She really did. That evening, as I worked late in my office, my phone rang with an unknown Chicago number. I answered to find it was the director of the Museum of Automotive Arts, a prestigious institution dedicated to preserving and celebrating automotive history. Ms. Bennet, he began formally. I hope I'm not disturbing you. I received your information from Alberto Martinelli, who speaks very highly of your knowledge and approach to preservation. Not disturbing at all, I assured him, curious about the unexpected contact. We're curating an exhibition on women in motorsport and automotive design, he explained. Alberto mentioned your grandmother's Ferrari 330 GTC, which has quite a remarkable provenance for being female-owned from new. We'd be honored to feature it in the exhibition once the restoration is complete. I sat back in my chair, momentarily speechless. The request was more than a professional courtesy, it was an opportunity to honor Grandma Helen's legacy, to showcase her story alongside other women who had defied expectations in a predominantly male world. That would be perfect, I said finally. She would have loved that. Excellent, he replied warmly. Alberto mentioned that you've preserved her documentation, purchase records, photographs, correspondence. That kind of personal material really brings these stories to life for our visitors. I have all of it, I confirmed. Including letters she wrote about her experiences as a female Ferrari owner in the 1960s. Wonderful. We'd also like to record an oral history with you about her, if you're willing. These personal connections, these stories of how these remarkable machines affected real lives, that's what transforms a car exhibition into something truly meaningful. After we'd arranged details and ended the call, I sat in my quiet office, looking out at the Chicago skyline now glittering with evening lights. The synchronicity was almost too perfect to be coincidental, as if Grandma Helen were orchestrating events from beyond, ensuring that her story, and mine, would be properly seen and valued at last. I pulled out my phone and looked again at Vanessa's last message. We should talk. About the car. About everything. This time, I replied, yes, we should. Not about its monetary value, but about what it represents. About seeing beyond surface appearances. About recognizing worth that isn't obvious at first glance. When you're ready for that conversation, I'm here. The day the Ferrari arrived in Chicago was unseasonably warm for early spring, sunshine spilling across the city like liquid gold. I stood in the delivery bay behind Blackwell's main building, hands in my pockets to stop myself from fidgeting like a child on Christmas morning. The transport truck backed slowly into position, hydraulics whining as the ramp lowered. And there it was. My grandmother's 1967 Ferrari 330 GTC, transformed from neglected survivor to gleaming masterpiece. The Rosso Corsa paint caught the sunlight and threw it back in brilliant crimson flashes. Chrome details sparkled like precious gems. It looked simultaneously brand new and perfectly vintage, restored but not erased, its history and character preserved while its beauty was unveiled. Alberto stepped out from the passenger side, grinning widely. What do you think? I found I couldn't speak. Just stood there, taking in the perfect lines, the presence, the sheer rightness of the car as it was always meant to be. Is it too much? He asked, misinterpreting my silence. We were careful with the original patina inside, as you requested. It's perfect, I managed finally. Absolutely perfect. Relief spread across his face. Your grandmother would be proud, I think. I nodded, emotion tightening my throat. She would. The museum director had arrived by then, circling the Ferrari with reverent appreciation. Extraordinary, he murmured. One of the finest examples I've seen. He glanced at me. And to think it was sitting unrecognized in a garage all those years. Not unrecognized, I corrected gently. Just not by most people. He nodded, understanding in his eyes. The exhibition opens in 3 weeks. We'll need the car for photography and placement next week, if that works for you? Of course, I agreed, still unable to take my eyes off the Ferrari. I'll bring my grandmother's documentation as well. Perfect. He checked his watch. I have another appointment, but I look forward to seeing everything. And Aria? Thank you for sharing this piece of history. These stories matter. After he left, Alberto handed me the keys with a small ceremonial flourish. She drives beautifully. Smooth, responsive. We did a full tune-up before the journey here. I accepted the keys, their weight familiar yet somehow new in my palm. Thank you, Alberto. For everything. It was my pleasure. Truly. He paused, something wistful crossing his face. Cars like this, they have souls, yes? They deserve to be with people who recognize that. We spent another hour going over details of the restoration, changes made, original elements preserved. The engine had been rebuilt to factory specification. The wiring replaced for safety but routed exactly as it would have been in 1967. The interior leather cleaned and conditioned but deliberately left with the patina of decades of use. The worn spot on the steering wheel where Grandma Helen's hands had gripped it, the subtle impression in the driver's seat that still held the memory of her form. Will you drive it now? Alberto asked as we concluded our inspection. Today, I confirmed. Right now, in fact. He smiled broadly. Good. These cars are not meant for garages. They are meant for roads, for sunshine, for life. After Alberto departed in a waiting taxi, I stood alone with the Ferrari, running my fingers lightly over its flank. The connection to Grandma Helen felt almost tangible in that moment, as if by touching the car she had loved, I was somehow reaching through time to touch her hand as well. I slid into the driver's seat, the leather embracing me like an old friend. The key turned smoothly in the ignition, and the engine awakened with a throaty rumble that seemed to vibrate through my very bones. Not the harsh, attention-seeking roar of modern supercars, but something deeper, more melodic, a voice that spoke of craftsmanship and heritage and joy. Pulling out of Blackwell's compound, I merged carefully into Chicago traffic. The Ferrari moved with athletic grace, responsive to the slightest touch, powerful yet elegant. I drove without specific destination, simply enjoying the experience, the connection, the perfect harmony between machine and human. At a stoplight, a motorcycle pulled alongside. The rider, a woman in her 60s with silver hair escaping her helmet, glanced over, did a double take, then gave me an enthusiastic thumbs up. I smiled and nodded in return, recognizing a kindred spirit, someone who understood. I ended up driving to the lakefront, parking in a spot overlooking the vast blue expanse of Lake Michigan. The Ferrari ticked softly as the engine cooled, a mechanical heartbeat gradually slowing to rest. I sat there for a long time, watching sailboats drift along the horizon, feeling a profound sense of peace. My phone buzzed in my pocket, a text from May. Did it arrive? How is it? Pictures. Please. I smiled and took several photos of the Ferrari gleaming in the afternoon sun, the lake providing a perfect backdrop. As I was sending them, another message arrived, from my mother this time. Your father and I are coming to Chicago next weekend. Would like to see your new life. And the car, if possible. I read the message twice, noting what wasn't said as much as what was. No demands. No guilt. A request, not an expectation. And most significantly, an acknowledgement of my new life, recognition that I had built something of value on my own terms. I'd like that, I replied. Let me know your arrival details. I'll arrange something special. Later that evening, as I was enjoying a quiet dinner in my apartment, my phone rang with Vanessa's number. We hadn't spoken since our text exchange weeks earlier. I hesitated, then answered. Aria. Her voice was different somehow, less sharp, more tentative. I saw the pictures May posted. Of Grandma's car. Yes, I said, neither defensive nor apologetic. The restoration is complete. It's. She paused, as if struggling to find words. It's beautiful. I had no idea. I waited, sensing there was more. All these years, she continued slowly. I thought you were just stuck in the past. Holding on to something out of stubbornness or sentimentality. It wasn't about the past, I said. It was about recognizing something of value that wasn't obvious at first glance. She was quiet for a moment. Like you, she said finally. We didn't see you either, did we? The admission caught me off guard, so direct, so unlike the sister who had always maintained her rightness at all costs. No, I confirmed gently. You didn't. I'm sorry, she said, the words coming out in a rush. For the hotel. For how I've treated you. For a lot of things. I took a deep breath, acknowledging the sincerity in her voice. Thank you for saying that. Mom and Dad are coming to see you? Next weekend, I confirmed. I'd like to come too, she said. If that's okay. Daniel and we're taking some time apart. I think I need to figure out who I am without all the trappings. I thought about the journey I'd been on, from seeking external validation to finding internal worth. About how losing what you thought defined you could sometimes be the pathway to discovering your true self. I'd like that, I said, surprising myself with how much I meant it. There's an exhibition opening at the Automotive Museum. The Ferrari will be featured. You'd be welcome to attend with me. Really? The surprise in her voice was palpable. Even after everything? Family is complicated, I said. But it's still family. We talked for another hour, real conversation. Not the superficial exchanges or one-sided critiques that had characterized our relationship for years. Vanessa spoke about her new television position, how terrifying and exhilarating it was to build something based on her own abilities rather than Daniel's connections. I told her about my work at Blackwell, about the respect I'd found in a world that valued my specific expertise. I always thought you were playing with old cars to avoid real life, she admitted. I never understood that you were building expertise in something that actually mattered to you. We tend to dismiss what we don't understand, I said, thinking. Of all the times my family had minimized my passion as a quirky hobby rather than a legitimate career path. I'm learning that, she said quietly. The hard way. After we hung up, I sat on my balcony watching the city lights shimmer against the night sky. The conversation with Vanessa had left me thoughtful, reflective. There was something powerful in being truly seen after years of invisibility, but something equally powerful in being able to see others clearly in return. The weekend arrived. With perfect spring weather, the city seeming to sparkle under clear blue skies. I had arranged for my parents and Vanessa to meet me at Blackwell before proceeding to the museum for a private preview of the exhibition. As I waited in the reception area, I felt a curious blend of emotions, anticipation, certainly, but also a calm confidence that hadn't been present in previous family encounters. They arrived together, my mother elegant as always, my father looking slightly uncomfortable in a sport coat that suggested this was an occasion of significance. Vanessa followed, more subdued than I was accustomed to seeing her, dressed simply in a way that emphasized her natural beauty rather than her usual polished perfection. Aria, my mother said, embracing me with unexpected warmth. You look wonderful. My father stood awkwardly for a moment before giving me a quick hug. The office is impressive, he said, glancing around the tasteful reception area with its discreet displays of automotive art and history. Thank you, I replied. Would you like a tour before we head to the museum? I showed them through Blackwell's public spaces, the gallery of automotive art, the library of rare books and documentation, the showroom where particularly significant vehicles were displayed for clients. My colleagues greeted me with obvious respect, deferring to my expertise in ways that clearly registered with my family. You've really made something of yourself here, my father said as we concluded the tour, surprise evident in his voice. I smiled. I've been making something of myself for years, Dad. It's just more visible now. He had the grace to look abashed. At that. Yes, well, I suppose we weren't looking properly. Are we going to see the Ferrari? Vanessa asked, a hint of her old impatience showing through. It's already at the museum, I explained. We have a private viewing arranged before the exhibition opens to the public next week. The museum was only a short drive away. I had debated whether to take the Ferrari itself, to make a statement of sorts, but had decided against it. This wasn't about proving anything anymore. It was about sharing something meaningful. We were greeted at the museum entrance by the director himself, who led us through quiet galleries toward a special exhibition space. Women in Motion, Female Pioneers in Automotive History, read the sign above the entrance, elegantly lettered in vintage-inspired script. We're still finalizing some displays, the director explained as we entered. But the centerpiece is ready. And there it was, my grandmother's Ferrari 330 GTC, positioned on a slightly raised platform, bathed in perfect lighting that highlighted every exquisite detail of its design. Behind it, a large photograph showed Grandma Helen standing proudly beside the car when it was new, hand resting possessively on its roof, her expression one of quiet confidence and joy. Oh my mother breathed, stopping short. That's Mother. I watched as she moved closer to the photograph, studying it with new eyes. I never saw this picture before. Grandma kept it in her private album, I explained, along with all the documentation about the car. The director gestured toward a display case containing carefully arranged items, the original purchase documents, service records, newspaper clippings of Helen participating in touring events, and most poignantly, excerpts from her letters, describing the freedom she found behind the wheel. The public rarely hears these stories, the director said, of women who defied convention, who claimed spaces traditionally reserved for men. Your mother's car is a perfect embodiment of that spirit, not just a beautiful machine, but a statement of independence and self-determination. My mother was reading one of the excerpts, her expression soft with discovery. They tell me a woman has no business driving such a powerful car, she read aloud. But behind the wheel, I am not defined by their expectations. I am defined by my own courage, my own joy, my own choices. She looked up at me, something like wonder in her eyes. I never knew she felt this way. She tried to tell us, I said gently. In her own way. My father had moved to examine the Ferrari itself, circling it slowly, taking in details he had never bothered to notice before. This is quite extraordinary, he admitted. I always thought it was just an old sports car she kept out of stubbornness. That's the thing about value, I said, joining him. Sometimes it's obvious only to those willing to look beyond surface appearances. Vanessa stood slightly apart, her expression complex, admiration mixed with something that might have been regret. I moved to stand beside her. It's not too late, you know, I said quietly. She glanced at me. For what? To see beyond appearances. To recognize real value, in things, in others, in yourself. She swallowed hard. I'm trying, she whispered. It's harder than I thought it would be. The most valuable things usually are. We spent nearly 2 hours at the museum, examining every aspect of the exhibition. The director shared stories of other female automotive pioneers, designers, racers, engineers whose contributions had often been overlooked or attributed to male colleagues. My mother, surprisingly, asked the most questions, seeming genuinely fascinated by these women who had carved spaces for themselves in unlikely places. Your grandmother would be proud, the director told me as we prepared to leave. Not just of how beautifully you've preserved her car, but of how you're helping to tell these important stories. My mother overheard him and nodded slowly. Yes, she agreed. Helen would be very proud of Aria. The simple statement, delivered without qualification or caveat, felt like a door opening between us, not fully, perhaps, but enough to let in light where there had been only shadow. We had dinner at a small Italian restaurant nearby, the kind of place where the owner knew every regular by name and treated first-time visitors like long-lost friends. The conversation flowed more easily than any family meal I could remember, without the usual undercurrents of judgment and comparison. I've been thinking about what you said, my father remarked as we finished our main course. About not seeing what was in front of us all along. I waited, giving him space to continue. It wasn't just the car we didn't see properly, he admitted, glancing at my mother as if seeking confirmation. It was you. And Helen, my mother added softly. I was so busy being frustrated by her unconventional choices that I never stopped to consider why she made them. Or what they meant to her. It's easy to dismiss what we don't understand, I said, echoing what I'd told Vanessa earlier. Or what doesn't fit our expectations. Like your career, my father acknowledged. I always thought you were just dabbling. I never realized you were building expertise that would be truly valued by others, if not by us, my mother added, a hint of regret coloring her voice. I looked at each of them in turn, my father, my mother, Vanessa. The family that had simultaneously shaped me and failed to see me. There was no perfect resolution here, no fairy tale transformation. That would erase years of misunderstanding. But there was, perhaps, a beginning. A willingness to look deeper, to see more clearly. I think, I said carefully, that we've all been operating from different definitions of value. Different ideas about what constitutes success or meaning. Maybe now we can start to appreciate those differences instead of trying to eliminate them. Vanessa, who had been uncharacteristically quiet throughout dinner, looked up from her wine glass. Like how you saw value in that in Grandma's Ferrari, when the rest of us just saw an inconvenience taking up garage space. Exactly. I agreed. Different eyes see different things. The next morning, I took each of them for a ride in the Ferrari before it would be officially installed in the museum exhibition. My father first, his initial nervousness giving way to boyish delight as the powerful engine surged along Lake Shore Drive. My mother next, sitting primly at first but gradually relaxing into the experience, one hand trailing in the wind, a smile playing at the corners of her mouth in a way that suddenly, startlingly reminded me of Grandma Helen. Vanessa was last, and perhaps the most transformed by the experience. I get it now, she said as we cruised through the morning sunlight, the Ferrari's engine singing its mechanical symphony. Why Grandma left it to you. Why you kept it all these years. I glanced at her, curious. It's not just a car, she continued, her hand caressing the hand-stitched leather of the door panel. It's a statement. About knowing your own worth even when others don't see it. About patience and preservation and recognizing what matters. I smiled, something warm unfurling in my chest. Exactly. She was quiet for a moment, watching the city scroll past. I think I've spent my whole life chasing external validation, she admitted finally. The right house, the right car, the right husband. Always something new, always something more. And none of it ever felt enough. And now? I asked. Gently. She turned to look at me, her expression more open than I could ever remember seeing it. Now I'm starting to wonder what it would feel like to value myself for who I am, not what I have. To find worth from within rather than from others. Approval. She gave a small, self-deprecating laugh. Turns out my little sister had it figured out long before I did. We each find our way in our own time, I said, thinking of my own journey from seeking validation to finding internal worth. The important thing is that we keep looking, keep growing. Later that day, after my family had departed for the airport, I returned to the museum alone. The Ferrari sat in its place of honor, surrounded now by other displays, women racers in their cars, female designers with their sketches, engineers with their innovations. A constellation of stories about finding one's path despite obstacles, about claiming space in worlds designed to exclude. The director found me there, contemplating my grandmother's car in the quiet gallery. "It's quite something, isn't it?" he said, coming to stand beside me. "How objects can carry so much meaning." I nodded. "They're vessels for our stories. For our values." "Exactly." He smiled. "That's why this exhibition matters. Because these aren't just machines, they're manifestations of courage, of persistence, of refusing to be limited by others' expectations." "My grandmother understood that," I said. "She tried to teach me, in her way. And now you're teaching others," he observed. "By sharing her story. By living your own." As I drove home in the soft evening light, I thought about legacy, not the kind measured in possessions or achievements, but in values transmitted, in courage inspired, in paths illuminated for those who follow. Grandma Helen hadn't just left me a valuable car, she had left me a philosophy of living authentically despite pressure to conform. And now I was continuing that legacy, not by replicating her choices, but by honoring the spirit behind them. By recognizing value that others overlooked. By refusing to be diminished by others' limited perceptions. By claiming the right to define success on my own terms. The next day, I returned to work at Blackwell, diving into preparations for an upcoming auction. My colleagues and I worked late, cataloging rare vehicles, documenting provenance, establishing market values. As we were finishing, the director appeared with an unexpected announcement. "Aria," he said, "the board has approved the creation of a new position, Director of Heritage Authentication. Given your expertise and growing reputation in the field, we'd like to offer it to you." I blinked in surprise. I'm honored." "You've earned it," he said simply. "Your ability to see beyond surface appearances, to recognize true value where others might miss it, that's rare and valuable in this field." Later that evening, as I sat on my balcony watching the city lights shimmer against the darkening sky, my phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Took your advice. Started at that restoration shop you recommended. They're letting me apprentice on a 59 Alpha rebuild. Never been happier. Thanks for seeing something in me." I smiled, thinking about the chain of recognition and value that had brought me to this moment. Grandma Helen seeing something in me. Alberto seeing something in the Ferrari. The museum director seeing something in our story. Me seeing something in Marcus. Each link forged through the simple but profound act of looking beyond surface appearances. To recognize true worth. My phone buzzed again, May this time, family dynamics shifting like tectonic plates after your Chicago weekend. Mom actually brought up Grandma Helen at dinner without the usual eye roll. Dad's researching vintage Ferraris online. Vanessa's being weirdly introspective? "What did you do to them?" I laughed softly. "Nothing," I texted back. "Just showed them something valuable they hadn't bothered to see before." "The car?" I thought about that for a moment. The car. Grandma's story. Mine. The value of seeing beyond appearances. May replied with a single heart emoji, then added, "Coming to the exhibition opening next week. Reserved my plane ticket. Need to see this Ferrari that changed everything." As I set my phone down, I felt a profound sense of peace settle over me. Not because everything was perfect, family dynamics were too complex for fairy tale resolutions, but because I had finally found my footing in the world. Not as the person my family had expected me to be, but as the person Grandma Helen had recognized from the beginning. In her letter, she had written, "The Ferrari is worth a great deal in monetary terms, but its true value lies in what it represents, the courage to live on your own terms, even when those around you disapprove." I understood now that this was never just about a car. It was about the courage to be authentically yourself in a world that often demands conformity. About recognizing that true value isn't always obvious at first glance. About honoring what matters, even when others can't see it. My sister had laughed at my old car until the moment external validation forced her to reconsider. But the Ferrari's worth hadn't changed in that moment, only her perception of it had. Just as my worth hadn't changed when my family finally began to see me clearly. I had always been valuable. I had always been worthy. I had always been enough. And that, perhaps, was Grandma Helen's greatest legacy, not the Ferrari itself. But the understanding that your value doesn't depend on others' recognition of it. That living authentically is its own reward. That sometimes the most precious things in life are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone with the wisdom to truly see them. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell, so you don't miss any upload from us.